Week 12 of the fantasy football season. Here's tight end starts hit every matchup. This week, Thursday night, Buffalo Bills at the Houston Texans. Dawson Knox is hit. Last week, he didn't do much. One catch, 23 yards in that one. It looks like Kincaid's going to be out once again here in practice to begin the week for this Buffalo Bill team. And Kincaid, he's been a good piece in this offense all season long. But like I said last week, Josh Allen was spreading the football out all over the yard to other wide receivers, and also as well ran the football 3 times for touchdowns. So this week at Houston, he's a sit. Dalton Schultz to start, one of the better tight ends over the last month of the season in fantasy football, in 4 out of 5 games with double-digit fantasy points for Dalton Schultz. I know he's banged up. I know he's not 100%, but I think he'll give it a go once again. This week he's a start. Indianapolis Colts at the Kansas City Chiefs. Tyler Warren. It's been a great rookie season for him at the tight end position. I know this is a tough matchup versus one of the better defenses in the league in Kansas City, but like I said, he's pretty much been matchup proof, and coming off a bye week, I think he'll help the rookie as well. So he's a start. Travis Kelce is a start. Ever since Rashee Rice has returned to the lineup, it's opened things up even more for Travis Kelce. And last week he turned the clock back a little bit with that touchdown he had, breaking the tackle and just getting into the end zone easily. And this week in a matchup versus a mediocre Colt defense, he's a start. Seattle Seahawks at the Tennessee Titans. A.J. Bonner, he's a fringe option. Bonner, it's been a solid season. At times, he's been the number 2 option in this passing game for the Seahawks team. And last week in that matchup at the Rams, he had 10 catches, 70 yards in that one, which is a huge ball for a tight end, especially getting 10 catches in a ball game. So this week at a bad Titan team, he's a fringe option, and Chigga was here. Pretty much anyone on this offense you can't trust. Now, Calvin Ridley out for the season. I know targets could go up for Okwango and other players in this offense, but like I said, you can't trust anyone on this team. There sits Minnesota Vikings. Can't trust anyone. So Okwango's a sit. Minnesota Vikings at the Packers. T.J. Hawkinson, it's been a down year. J.J. McCarthy, he really can't get anything going in this offense for any of his weapons. So this week in a matchup at the Packers, I know Hawkinson, he's very familiar with Green Bay going back to his Lion days in the last couple of years here with Minnesota, but he's a sit. Luke Musgrave a sit. I thought he'd be at least decent with Musgrave. I'm not saying he was going to go out there, put up Tucker Kraft numbers for this Packer team, but he hasn't done much at all in 2 starts. So this week, he's a sit. New York Jets at the Baltimore Ravens. Mason Taylor a sit. It's been a rookie type of year for Taylor. 1 good game, 1 bad game, but now you get the veteran quarterback Tyrod Taylor in there for this New York Jet team, where obviously that can help this whole receiving corps, where he's a better thrower of the football, has a better IQ in the pocket than a Justin Fields. But still this week, it's a wait-and-see approach with Taylor in there. So for Taylor, he's a sit. Mark Andrews a start. The last couple weeks, once again, he has been a touchdown-dependent tight end is Mark Andrews. Last week, a quick fake spin move where he took it to the end zone for over 20 yards and found the end zone. So this week, a good matchup. Jets have one of the worst linebacking crews in all pro football. And Mark Andrews, like I said, even last season, he was a touchdown-dependent tight end, but it does get the job done, and it puts up fantasy points. New York Giants at the Detroit Lions. Theo Johnson to start. He's arguably the number 2-3 option in this offense for this New York Giant team. And last week, he had a good ball game with Jameis Winston in their quarterback. So if Jackson Dart's in or not, I still think Theo Johnson, regardless, is going to be a starting option for fantasy owners. Brock Wright is it. Sam Laporta, we know he's out with a back injury, but Brock Wright pretty much did nothing at all in that loss versus the Philadelphia Eagles in Week 11, where they lost 16-9. So this week, even in a plus matchup versus the New York Giants, I'm not going to have full confidence in putting Wright out there. He's a sit. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Chicago Bears. Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington a sit for me. Pretty much, it's been DK Metcalf for nothing in this offensive game all season long for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. But I thought, why would they trade for Jonnu Smith when they already had Freiermuth and Darnell Washington? And Jonnu Smith hasn't done much all season. So Freiermuth, he showed some flashes here and there. Had a couple big games, but week in and week out, he's not consistent. Darnell Washington, the last couple weeks, his snaps have gone up a little bit, and also the targets have gone up. So with Mason Rudolph's in there quarterback, I think these guys will get more targets than with Aaron Rodgers in their quarterback, but still, I can't trust them this week. It's posting level in the start for me in this game. The last couple weeks, his numbers have gone up. I know the numbers haven't been eye-popping since going back a few weeks ago at the Cincinnati Bengals in that 47-42 victory for this Bear team, where he had over 100 yards and found the end zone twice. But like I said, Loveland, he was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. He's still going out there putting up okay ball games. And this week versus Pittsburgh, I think he could go out there once again and get his 7 to 10 fantasy points. Cole Kmet is it. Last week was the best game of the season for Cole Kmet, but he's a tight end where he really hasn't done much over the last couple seasons since Caleb Williams got drafted to the Chicago Bear team. So this week, in this matchup, he's a sit for me. New England Patriots at the Cincinnati Bengals. Hunter Henry, his numbers have been up and down over the last month of the season, but the only reason I'm putting him in the lineup this week, a great matchup at the Cincinnati Bengals, arguably the worst defense in the league. And Hunter Henry, we've seen him have those pop games at times. So last week coming off a mediocre game, this week in a great matchup, I'm just going off of that as a streaming option. He's a starter. Noah Fant, a sit for me in this ball game. Noah Fant, he showed some flashes on and off this season for this Bengal team, but he's another tight end you can't trust week in and week out. Cleveland Browns at the Vegas Raiders. Harold Fannin Jr. start for me. Harold Fannin, he's overtaken the tight end position over the last few weeks over David Njoku, and rightfully so. We know this Brown team's going nowhere. Now on the third quarterback of the season, started with Flacco, then Dylan Gabriel, now Shedeur Sanders is going to start with Gabriel's in concussion protocol. But Fannin Jr., he's looked impressive at times. Can run yard after catch, good ability. And like I said, even from the beginning of the year, he's been taking snaps from Njoku, so he's a start. David Njoku was said his numbers have gone down over the last couple of weeks. We know he's a free agent after the season, and we'll see if this Brown team re-signs him. But pretty much Njoku, he's been a touchdown-dependent tight end. He's a sit. Brock Bowers a start each and every week. After a bad game in Week 10 at the Broncos, where he only got targeted 4 times in that game, he came back on 13 targets versus the Dallas Cowboys. Had a solid game, 7 catches, 72 yards. Bowers still one of the better tight ends in the league. Obviously, Trey McBride, to me, this season's been the better tight end, and Bowers missed a lot of games early with a knee injury, but he looks 100%. And this week, even in a tougher matchup versus the Browns, he's a tight end you start each and every week. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Arizona Cardinals. Brenton Strange, he practiced last week. Obviously, didn't give it a go. So we'll see if he's back in the lineup this week as Strange. And Strange, he was making some plays and putting up numbers. The most consistent option he was the first month of the season before he got injured for this Jacksonville Jaguar team. But even this week, if he's back, it's a wait-and-see approach at a bad Cardinal defense. And Hunter Long, he hasn't done much all season long, more of a blocker. And the tight end position's pretty much been obsolete in terms of catching the football over there in Jacksonville. Since Strange went out with injury, Trey McBride, best tight end in fantasy football easily this season. Since Jacoby Brissett's in the lineup, he's taken his game to another level. Last week, once again, over 100 yards finding the end zone. And this week versus Jacksonville, I think it's another big game once again for Trey McBride. Philadelphia Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Goedert to start. Cowboys still one of the worst linebacking crews in all pro football, even after adding Logan Wilson at the NFL trade deadline. And Dallas Goedert, it's been a solid season for him. I know last week he didn't do much. That was bad weather last week in Philadelphia where nothing was going on in that one. So this week indoors, fast track at the Cowboys. Goddard, an easy start for me this week. And Jake Ferguson, a start. Last week, found the end zone. One of the better tight ends in all pro football and fantasy football this season is Jake Ferguson. Off season, he got a nice contract extension. And defenses, they're not rolling attention to him where you got to deal with CeeDee Lamb, obviously, and George Pickens and Javonte Williams out of the backfield. So this week in a matchup, even versus a good Eagles defense, he's a start for me, is Jake Ferguson. And he's amongst the league leaders in touchdowns at the tight end position. Atlanta Falcons at the New Orleans Saints. Kyle Pitts is it. I know Kirk Cousins, he's going to be the starter, and actually can help Kyle Pitts a little bit in this week's matchup. And also it's a good matchup on paper at the New Orleans Saints, a defense that hasn't been good this season. But Kyle Pitts, once again, different quarterback, different system. It just doesn't matter. It just hasn't clicked for Kyle Pitts, where he's been inconsistent all season long once again in Pitts. Even with Cousins back in a good matchup, he's a sit. Juwan Johnson, he's a start for me in this ball game. Juwan Johnson, he's been doing it all of late for this New Orleans Saints team. Number 2 option in the passing game, especially since Shaheed got traded off to the Seattle Seahawks. And Johnson and Tyler Show, they've been locked in since he's been in the starting lineup for the last couple of weeks. And a young quarterback security blanket and best friend is always at tight end position. So this week he's a start for the Buccaneers at the Los Angeles Rams. Cade Otton a start. I know last week was a down game, but it was the Sean Tucker show in that one where he had a couple big plays where this offense didn't need long, sustained drives. So Cade Otton, I think, will bounce back. Big target, 6'6", 6'7", especially in the red zone and the end zone. And this week they know they got to put points back on the board once again versus the Rams. And I think this Ram team's going to try to stop the run more than anything after what we saw Tucker do last week. But also it could be Bucky Irvin back in the lineup. But either way, I think Otton bounces back. He's a start. Tyler Higbee, Colby Parkinson assists. I know they've had touchdowns over the last couple weeks of these tight ends, but pretty much the tight end position is a touchdown-dependent position over there in Los Angeles, where these guys are more used at the goal line on play action or quick outs in this offense, nothing more than that. So this sits this week on Monday night. Carolina Panthers at the 49ers. Jatavian Sanders is sit. Tommy Trimble is sit. Sanders, we haven't seen much at all once again this season from him. And Tommy Trimble, he had a big 53-yard catch, breaking a few tackles to get him in field goal range and win the ball game last week at the Falcons. But he hasn't been a fantasy option. He's a sit. And George Kittle, he's back in form. Brock Purdy returned last week at Arizona, found Kittle twice in the end zone. And when healthy, we know Kittle's a top 5 option each and every week at the tight end position. So this week, in a good matchup versus the Carolina Panthers, he's a start. So that's tight end starts it every matchup for week 12 of the fantasy football season.